Hey, everybody, welcome. It's so great to have all of you tune us in and turn us on. Thank you so very much for all of that. Today, I got a very special guest, Susan Dolci, joining me here today. We're going to talk about transformational stories. But Benny, I
Yes,
want to
ma'am.
talk to you for a minute, and
Oh, okay.
then I'll introduce Susan. Remember all of the times Benny and I, 16 years, right? Remember all of the times like we would be there and I'd be in the studio and the guest just would not show up. We couldn't
There
find
have been
them.
times, yes, I do remember.
Right.
Mhm.
Those have been the best shows because we had to improvise, right?
Sure, maybe on your head or in your mind, I'm
Mhm.
busy running around with, like, a chicken with his head cut off, like,
Exactly.
so,
But
I mean, I agree with you, yes.
you though got the brunt of how to fill in that time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
what happened with those, Susan, is that those are the best storytelling episodes. Because I remember one episode we did, and Benny and I were telling the story about how we shared a goldfish. And then one of the listeners said, I didn't know you and Benny were a couple. I said, no, 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 no. We just shared a goldfish.
Yeah,
But
apparently you heard the part of the story not in the beginning on how we didn't, and then we did share, but it wasn't a couple
exactly.
relations. Yeah, right, but go ahead.
Exactly.
Mhm.
But we fill that time telling a story from beginning to end. We filled an hour. The next time a host didn't show up or somebody didn't show up, we filled the hour telling the story about the goldfish. And then I got the little lobster.
Yeah.
And that was a show we did improv, but it was about a story. Now, fast forward to where we are today. And I'm just recently talking about my journey in life and my story. But from day one of crust busting your way to an awesome life and our own network, we built this on telling stories on talk radio, which, by the way, is totally not conventional. But what Susan does, and the importance of what she does, is she literally works with people and helps share the stories that drive the greater good of the world. And so when I think about her as a certified diamond process transformational life coach, right? You know, the creator of Goddess Arriving, I've worked with her personally, getting ready for her show, right? Here's the thing I love, whether it's talking about her extensive corporate career or it's talking about whether she decides to write something, talk something, taking that journalism degree, bringing it out into the world, doing a blog, she understands the importance of stories in the world we live in today. And I am so thrilled she's joining our network because we transform we transform ourselves, we transform the world in stories. So today, you're going to hear what her story might be about, but more importantly, how do we use that story to change our world? Because we got to change our world before we can be like changing the world. And that story, Susan, that I talked with Benny about, we shared in those times where people didn't show up, we shared some just incredible, gut wrenching stories. But we didn't think about them as stories. And I didn't think about them as stories until I met you. Susan Dolce, everybody. Susan, great to have you.
Hi, Dr. Pat. It's great to be here. I'm full disclosure, a little nervous, but very excited.
Forget about it. Uh,
Yeah.
look, I seriously, I didn't start this as look, you are immersed in the world of journalism. I dialed the wrong phone number. That's why you and I are talking. So everything that this network has been based on, and especially my show, has been based on trial, error, show up, talk, tell a story, have fun. But I didn't realize till I met you that there's a reason why people call us the Disney of podcasting. I didn't realize that our style is not really talk radio style, right? If you've heard talk radio, that certainly isn't us. But you clearly understand the importance of stories. And I don't think that I have until I met you. So I want to ask you, in your life, what did you have to overcome? What challenges, what things popped up and you looked at them and said, "Oh, that's like a dark hole." What did you have to get past, overcome, initiate in your life, Susan, to bring you to this very moment in the understanding of stories?
It's one of the most, I mean, we all have stories, right? I mean, we all have a story. We are the hero of our own story. We write the story, but we don't, like you said, we're not really conscious of the fact that it's a story and it shapes our behaviors, it shapes our beliefs, it shapes what motivates us in the world. So there, I mean, and it, we all have like this collection of stories that are our experiences that kind of make us who we are. And my most transformational story happened when I was 26 years old. So I am grateful that it happened when I was young, prior to having children, because this was a huge, huge moment for me. I had been in a 6-year marriage that was, I like to call it my made for TV marriage.
Mm-hmm.
It was just bad on a lot of levels. There was verbal abuse, there was emotional abuse, there was physical abuse at times. And it took, I mean, that's its own story in and of itself, to where I got the courage to get out of it, dare I say escape, because I felt like I was trapped. But so 26 years old, afraid to reach out to my parents and say, I got to move back home. I don't have any place else to go. What's my dad going to think? You know, my dad thought my ex-husband was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And my dad was a very, I mean, I love my dad dearly, but he was a judgmental man, and he was very hard to please. He was hard to, I mean, it was the sort of relationship where I was always trying to seek his praise. Like I like to say to my clients, and it's on my website, I really believe that everybody's deepest need is to be seen and heard. And that's where the story part comes in. So I moved back home, throw my pride in the garbage. You know, like I was living in California. My parents lived in Chicago, packed up my stuff, moved cross country, and, you know, slept in my old bedroom. Imagine that. You know, now you feel like you're a kid again, right?
Yeah.
You're not an adult. All that's been taken away from you because you messed up your life so badly that now you've got to like come crawling back and say, can you please take care of me for a while? So that was really hard in and of itself. And I was sitting, this is so clear to me. We had a spiral staircase. We lived in it was a home that had been built in the 1920s. And it was my dad's baby, was to have this spiral staircase put in so we could, you know, use the upstairs more. It was more efficient to get up and down the stairs. And there were 2 easy chairs parked sort of next to the spiral staircase. And I was tiny enough that I could fit in between the rails of the staircase. And that's where I would sit most of the time when I was a little kid. And my dad and I would chat and stuff. That was always sort of my spot. And I was sitting there, and I'd been home for a while. And it was the first time he thought that, you know, he thought this was a time to ask me about what had happened. Because we really hadn't talked about it up until that point. I really didn't get into the details of why I needed to come home. And so I told him, I said, well, you know, there was physical abuse and verbal abuse. And I was really like, I had that battered wife mentality. I was trapped. I lived in fear all the time.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he said, well, Susie, you must have done something to deserve it. And it was the most grace-filled moment of my life, because I could have chosen to get up and walk away. I could have defended myself. I could have fought back. There's so many things I could have said. But when I saw him sitting in that chair and he said, you must have done something to deserve it. Literally before my eyes, he was transformed into this little boy. He was a little boy who was punished by his parents, who didn't, he had some learning disabilities. He had dyslexia. He wasn't a good student. And I could see him asking his parents, what did I do to deserve this? Why are you punishing me like this? Why am I not worthy? And it became crystal clear for me that all of us, the stories we write, the stories that are driving us and motivating us, are all the stories of those wounded children. They're all the little ones in us, our little Susans or our little Roys, who all we were doing was trying to cope as young children, being bombarded by emotions we probably weren't ready to deal with, experiences we weren't ready to deal with, situations, and just trying to find a way to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And so when we move out in the world,
Yeah.
it's that little one story that's driving everything. And we're
Yeah.
not even conscious of it.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. Because we're going through a time right now, Susan, and for those of us that have been in abusive relationships, we get it. Every word you're speaking, I'm hanging on to it because I know what that's like, having gone through it myself. And yet I too, just like you, the outside world, even to this day, wants to say, what did you do to provoke it? I mean, even to this day, we're reading now in my field, we're reading stories of the level of what you just described that go beyond the imagination. But see, now here you are today, here I am today, because we're bringing the power of that story. Maybe somebody heard you today and a life will be saved. A child will be saved. See, isn't that the power of sharing that story, right?
Mm-hmm. And so many people, I mean, it's that if you think about how many people suffer from depression and anxiety and are
Yeah.
living in fear, and it's because they feel isolated, they feel disconnected.
Yeah.
And that's what stories do. They connect us.
Yeah.
And they give us the ability to, if we're not connecting, at least we're getting, it's changing our perspective. We can walk in somebody else's shoes.
Yeah.
That's where we get those aha moments, and those big perspective changes where it's like, I never thought about it that way before. Like, just, like I was saying the story with my dad, I never thought about how the way I was parented and all of the choices he made and the ways, the places where he was hard on me, where he didn't praise me, where he did praise me, where he gave me affection, where he didn't, was all based on his childhood, the way he was parented. And I could have chose at that moment, I could have walked away. I could have said, I could have written him off my life, and I could have said, I can't be in a relationship with you. I can't do this. Or I could choose to love. I could choose to see him as that wounded person or wounded child, instead of just walking away and cutting him out. And
Yeah.
that was a huge gift. Like I said, it was a graceful moment because it was truly, it was surreal, and it was life changing.
And, that's really the power of the work that you do because, there are stories in each of us, and I know that, you're going to talk with us in a minute about the story field because one of the things I learned in looking back at history and beliefs is, there was a sense in my case, there was a sense that something was off with my mom. My birth mom dies. I'm 6 years old. I'm in Catholic boarding school. There was just a series of events before that seemed off. Like, why was I even in Catholic boarding school? What was going on at home? Like 6 years old, why is any kid in Catholic boarding school? But but as a kid, it never makes sense. But you just kind of do what you're told to do. But as you get older, you start to wonder, just like you did. You start to question. Most people don't know what to do with that. I think for us, right? I finally got the boldness when my uncle, my favorite uncle, who knew my whole childhood story, knew my dad, stopped talking to my dad, didn't even go to my dad's funeral. And I'm thinking, what the heck happened here? And I couldn't get anybody to tell me, but intuitively we knew. And it wasn't until my dad passed away and my stepmom handed me letters from my birth mom that it revealed a few things. And I grabbed my uncle at 90 years old and I said, you are going to tell me the story. You have to tell me the story. I said, this blank, 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 beep, 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 this does not make sense. And the story that I got, the revelation of that, put everything together. Now, it didn't help me with the kind of change I needed to make at the time, but it did something that helped me. And so what you're talking about, and I want to talk about this story field you referred to seems to be the magical potion, the key that unlocks the door that'll never be unlocked, the magic code to open up the door in Westworld that only one person has. But they are the keys. Tell us about that and how you discovered Storyfield.
Well, in doing research, kind of prepping for the whole concept of what I wanted to do with the show, I knew that there was something more meta level about stories than just, how our own stories drive us and help our behaviors and our choices and our relationships and everything. And I found it. The website was cointelligence.net. And it was the first time I saw the word story field. And I was like, that's what I was trying to put words around. And it's something we're not even conscious of it. It's like this invisible field of all of the stories that have made up humanity. And they can be broken down into, chapters, if you like to put it that way. One that I think everybody can relate to is the story of the American way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what comes to mind when you hear the American way? What do you think of?
Yeah, right. Picket fence, apple pie. Yeah.
Patriotism, individualism, rights, rags to riches, right?
Owning it. Yeah.
Put that in the American way.
Owning a Chevy. You have to own a Chevy.
Exactly. And we know, we're aware of it, but we don't really know that kind of drives society, right? And here in the United States. Another one that I'm kind of passionate about that kind of overlays with the American way is the whole patriarch femininity story where, women have, been sort of oppressed by the patriarchy, but it really, it's probably what sparked the feminist movement, but it's still part of our heritage isn't the right word, but if we think what's women's work, pregnant and barefoot in the kitchen. I think of, I mean, all the ways that women were oppressed and made to stay small and serve and not put themselves out there and be bold and courageous and fearless and authentic. So like, God, even Barbie dolls, like think about Barbie dolls, and it's just it fascinates me how they all sort of intertwine. And if you think about the patriarch feminine story field, how that overlays the American way, if you look at like the 40s and the 50s, right?
Yeah.
um and they're countless. Like we could go through like the whole circle of life. Isn't that like the original story field, right?
Right.
Children, death, and that whole cycle. So story fields really impact us on this meta level, unconscious level, and if we're not aware of them, we can't change the future.
Yeah. It's fascinating. We're talking about this. For those of you just tuning in, Susan Dolci is here. You're going to hear a lot more about Susan. We're going to make sure you have lots of information. Yesterday was a sad day for me, and sad at a level that it's hard to explain. One of my, let's say, heroes in this lifetime for me, believe it or not a woman, died. Larry Kramer.
Mm.
And for people that don't know who Larry Kramer is, go ahead and Google him. But for those of us that grew up in New York and really understood and were part of, the AIDS epidemic and what literally went on with AIDS, right? We know who Larry Kramer is. We've marched with in activism, and he came out when nobody else was speaking, and he brought a new narrative to the world, a new story. And it became a story that would forever change the landscape of how we look at disease, how we look at health, how we look at people. He was in the process of writing a play about what we're going through now. So a play, what is a play? It's a story.
Mhm.
And this was him, right? He wrote his frustration. He wrote the play, The Normal Heart. So this was not just a man who was an activist, but he was somebody that could express what was going on in the times we live in through story. Powerful, powerful story. And Susan, he's one example to me of how his personal story became a story that changed the world. And I want to talk with you about that when we come back. I want to talk about the work that you do to help people understand why transformational storytelling is our superpower. And it's interesting. I was thinking about him, and I was watching some of the older clips, and I was watching a time where I got to see him and be in front of him, like real time in the energy of that movement. And I remembered this. I remember looking at him like he had superpower magic. But then what I remember was, as you will talk about too when we come back, this was the hero's journey. And it was a journey that every one of us has the ability to create. It's being created in the world today. When we come back, I would love to talk with you about the things you've learned about stories and why transformational storytelling really is our superpower. Before we go to break, though, how do people find out more about you, Susan? Tell us about the best way to do that.
You can go to susandolci.com. That's my coaching website. Also, the blog is goddessarriving.com. And I have a YouTube channel under goddessarriving.com where I do a lot of storytelling.
Beautiful. When we come back, we're going to talk about this idea of transformational storytelling, superhero powers, but not just for the select few, not just for a Larry Kramer who became just magnificent at it, but every single one of us, every one of us. Let's take a short break. We'll be right back with Susan Dolci. Now that song, that is a story. Thank you, Benny, for playing that.
Yeah, no
That
problem.
is John Legend and Tata Prince. That's their new single that dropped, and I think the video dropped too.
Oh,
We
yeah,
got
it
to
did. It's called
did it?
Love One
Yeah.
Another. Yep,
Love one another. Yep.
Mhm.
That's a story. We got to participate in that video back in October, and it came out really in support of the energy we need to create, the story we need to create right now. And powerful, powerful video. People that participated in that movement over a 3-month period. Myself, I'm in it for, and these are short cameos. They're like 1 or 2 seconds. Jessica's in it. Gail's in it. Dee Wallace is in it. I dragged Dee down there to participate.
You
But this
dragged
is,
her.
I really did. I said, you got to come
I'm trying to see
this.
the timestamp marks on the video to see where we can see you, Pat. So I'm looking for that right now. You're like,
yeah.
great, thanks.
It's really quick. I'm in 2 clips, but one of them really quick. But I have my own other video, which I'll have to send you, Betty, for you to look at, which
All
was
right.
fun. But the point is this: there was a story that Jane Peralta Forbes wanted to tell. The story was, we have to love one another. And she began the initiative with lovenotes.world, and it turned into a movement, which turned into a song, which turned into a video, which crossed borders from one culture to a pop culture. But that's what Susan Dolci is here to talk with us about, because the power of storytelling is transformative. It is our superpower. That's her message. This is what she does to help people. This is it. And so the question really is, what can we learn from it? How does it change cultures? How does it change what we believe? And why is this body of work one of the most important bodies of work for the time we live in now? Susan, before we do that, give us your website again and let us know how people can find out more about you, please.
You can go to susandolci.com. That's the website if you're interested in mentoring me or going through any of my coaching packages. The blog that I've had predates the coaching website is goddessarriving.com. Goddess Arriving is also on Facebook and Instagram. And I have a YouTube channel under Goddess Arriving. Like I said,
Perfect.
A lot of stories that I like to tell.
So the bottom line to this is, change your story. I had to change my story. I had one story, but it didn't sit right with me. My life in those early years was really tough. I mean, I'm the kid, the mom commits suicide, which I found out later at age 6. I'm homeless at 17 and I'm arrested at 19. Now that could have been the rest of my life. That's one story. I'm not unlike a lot of other people right now. And then there are the other stories, right? There's a story just like you told. What is it like to be in an abusive relationship, whether your partner is verbally abusive? And in my case, threw me down a flight of stairs, right? I know it's hard to believe, Pat, right? Like, anybody going to do that to Pat? Well, it happens. But you are going to tell us about the importance of these storytellings and how they can become our superpower, because they can be.
So here's the thing about stories. As I said in the beginning, they spark human connection, but something happens chemically with us when we are pulled into a story. We feel those emotions as the person's telling the story. If we're, a really present listener, we begin to feel the storyteller's emotions. We begin to feel their fear or their courage. And I mean, think about, even if you've had a good book, right? You've been reading a good book and you're in that place, you're in that setting, taken away to some tropical location, or you put a book down and you kind of miss the characters because you're so interconnected with them. Telling a story it's medicine. Telling your story heals you. It's your way of voicing your authenticity, saying, this is me, this is what I went through, this was my dark night of the soul, but this is how I came out on the other end. This is how I'm different. This is how I have a new set of clothes. I've been transformed. And where I think a lot of people make mistake is that they think their story isn't important. They
Right.
think, you know, everybody's got a story. Nobody needs to hear my story. What have I got to tell? Nobody's interested. And the truth is, everybody has the capability of connecting with at least one other person and changing that person's life. So if you're looking at it as medicine, then it's an act of service. You are, by telling your story, you are serving another human. You're connecting with them so that they don't feel isolated and alone. I mean, I can think of countless times where I've put up like YouTube videos and I'll get comments that like, oh my God, I didn't know that I wasn't the only one who went through that. Like I have one of my most popular videos is about going through hot flashes and menopause. And so it was, people don't talk about that all the time, and countless comments saying, thank you. Now I know I'm not the crazy one, waking up in the middle of the night dripping with sweat. I feel like, you gave me some tools. And so storytelling is an act of service. And if you keep yourself quiet and small, you are almost robbing somebody from the opportunity of your story. There was a really good friend of mine, that her neighbor, she was going through some tough times. She was sick. Her husband was out of work, and her neighbor, who loves to cook, said, please, Joanne, can I make a casserole for you? Can I please cook for you? And Joanne was like, no, it's fine. We're all good. And she said to her, she's like, but you are robbing me of my gift of the spirit. Like, this is my gift. I'm good at cooking, and I want to do this for you. And this is how I want to serve you. And the same thing is true of sharing our stories. And when we connect with, when we dive deeper and understand the story that's driving us, the limiting beliefs that we have, the unconscious systems that are, like I said, motivating us to move and make choices and choose our relationships, when they're unconscious, we just keep repeating. We just get in this cycle and we never break through.
Yeah.
So in order to break through, you need to know the story.
Yeah. It's interesting we're talking about this, Susan, because Benny just played a song in a thing that we participated in. And so what's happening now, and I didn't know this was happening till today, so I want to share this with you. So what's happening now is all the people that were at my shoot, right? I don't know about the other shoots, but all the people took pictures. We all took pictures of the back scene, and we have pictures of the video itself. And so Leslie Sager, we call her Big Les. I don't know, but that's what we call her. She just put her own video together to take the story that's not been told about the making of this video and tell it in another way. And so it just dawned on me when you were speaking about this superpower of storytelling has this ripple effect. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So everybody talks about Greta, right? Greta is fantastic, but Greta sparked the spirit in other people of her age group. For example, Isra Hersey, 16 years old, Autumn Peltier, 6 years old, Bruno Rodriguez, 19 years old, Helena Gualalinga, 17 years old, right? Mary Copini, 12 years old. I had Susan Huff on with her 5 kids who did a show on how to bring forward Sabanfu's story about how to walk for water. It just dawned on me, the power of your work. See, what you're talking about helping people with is this aspect of superhero energy of storytelling that creates a ripple effect that really does change the world, doesn't it?
Well, and that's the whole. So we were talking briefly before about Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell is sort of the grandfather or the father. I don't know why I said grandfather. Anyway, the father of the hero's journey or the epic story. And he saw a pattern. He looked at all the ancient myths and Bible stories and legends, and he saw this pattern emerge. And it starts with someone, the hero. It starts with they're at the status quo, right? So they're in a situation. They're usually not very happy with the situation. They're disgruntled. They want to get out. They want an adventure, and then the adventure starts, and they meet their mentors, and along the way, usually people have some superhero powers. There becomes at the bottom of the circle, there's like the dark night of the soul, where the hero is either trapped or almost comes back from death. And once the hero is like resurrected and comes back from that dark night, now they have a new perspective. They have like the Force, right? So George Lucas used this whole hero's journey of Joseph Campbell when he was writing Star Wars. So you have where was I? So they've resurrected. They have a new superpower, which is in Star Wars. It's the Force, and it cycles back to a new status quo.
Yeah.
And the reason those words are so important to me right now, is especially with everything that's been going on with the pandemic and people sheltering in place and having to stop and having to slow down. We see, like you were talking about, Greta, how our world is beginning to heal because we haven't been driving, we haven't been flying. The earth Mother Nature has gotten a break.
Yeah.
And so we are in this really, really crucial time where we can stay in the status quo, or we can start that hero's journey and get to a new normal that keeps our environment healed. It heals our people. It heals how we view our families, how we view our jobs. I mean, I feel like I just posted something that Brene Brown put up, and it was about, I don't want to go back to the old normal.
Right.
I don't want to go back to that.
Right.
We need a new normal. We need to push the story one cog over to have a new story about where we want to see our earth go, our country go, humanity go. This is the time.
And you know what's interesting about what you're saying here? We're going to go to a short break here in a minute. What you're saying is that there are those of us like Brene Brown, there are those of us that we're looking at where we've been doing things and we're saying, wait a minute, we can really adapt this thing to our normal, what we do every day. For us, we've had to step up and do something really innovative with our technology until our new tech is finished. We just did a review of our new tech. But there are other things. There are companies that are like, well, wait a minute, this working from home thing, this might work. But the flip side of that is, Susan, I heard a story yesterday where, some companies and some leadership are not getting it. And they're basically like, yeah, like you got to come back to work and you have had COVID-19, but don't worry about that. Even if you have to still teach your kids at home, we got to have you back here, even if you're not tested. And I'm like, yeah, that is a story we've got to shine some light on. But more importantly, we have to be the change agents of that story. Mm-hmm. So when we come back, what are the stories that inspire us every day to pop it up, to get up, to want to do more, and to want to do next? Let's take a short break. We'll be right back. Susan Dolci and me, we'll be back. You gotta love yourself. Oh, sorry, song's over. Got carried away. We all had to memorize that song, Benny.
I would expect that, yes.
We had to memorize that song. Actually, I'm supposed to do a lip sync of the song. So we're supposed to be videotaping me doing that, right?
Okay.
You know me, I'm going to sing it.
Yeah, you
It's
should.
funny because we all got together and we're all like singing our hearts out, right? But you don't think anybody's like recording the sound, like you're dancing, and like there's a clip of me dancing with Tony, John Legend's best friend, right? So there's myself and these two other guys, and we're dancing and we're singing, but you don't think anybody's recording you. And one thing that my listeners here have heard me talk about, Susan, is, man, I am not the best singer on the planet, but it didn't matter. Susan
But you can make
Dolci,
up for it in your dancing skills.
I
So
did make
it's,
up for it.
yeah.
You should
So
see
I mean,
this dancing
yeah.
clip, Benny.
So
Yeah,
it's a win-win.
it's a win-win.
Yeah.
Susan, thank you for today. Let's talk about what happens when we take a story and we say, look, this is transformational, change my story, change the world. That's what you're doing, but you're also taking an action in the world. So let's talk about what's next for you, what's on the horizon.
My coaching is the kind of coaching that I do when it says it's a certified diamond process is was founded, it was developed by Veronica Cresto, and she's actually going to be my first guest on 3 Things I've Learned. So I'm very excited about that. But a lot of it, the basis of this work is really inner child work. And that's gaining a lot of popularity right now. I know Danielle Laporte's talking about it. It's one of those things that, again, it's that story of that little child that moves how we act in the world. And so when I have a client, and it could be, it really doesn't matter what they want to break through. If they're trying to find clarity in a relationship, if they have, some sort of disordered eating situation. I have clients that have, a lot of different things they want to work on. But what I'm always shocked at is after a few sessions, when we take the time for them to connect with their inner child. And when I say connect, like I want them to get a picture of themselves when they were like 5 years old. I want them to really remember what it was like to be little, where you had nothing but innocence and wonder and awe, and you were present most of the time, because what else did you have to do? That getting to that granular of a level to now start to tell the story. When was the first time you felt unworthy? When was the first time you were criticized? When was the first time you were seeking attention or love and you weren't getting what you needed?
Yeah.
And there's always a story. It's never the child, it's always somebody else's voice. So I'll always say, when you're triggered like that, I want you to say, whose voice is it? And when was the first time you heard it? Because those are the voices that we hear when we are stuck in our limiting beliefs, or when we're in fear, or when we're triggered. And what most people don't realize, so I'm a grown adult woman, right? And I have a whole bunch of stories that have gotten me to being a grown adult woman, but it's the story of my 6 or 7-year-old self who felt that I was not being seen and heard, who was seeking any attention whatsoever. There's a funny story. You want me to tell a funny story about that?
Yeah.
So when I was little, this was how, I think now in retrospect, my mom did this on purpose.
Yeah.
But I would get really, really mad, whatever it was. I would get so angry. And we lived in this small little house, 1 bathroom. I would lock myself in the bathroom. I remember it had a little, clicky, turny knob lock thing. And I would get the Ajax and I would and I would clean and I would scream like they couldn't hear me on the other side of the door. You hate me. Nobody loves me. You won't even come to my funeral. You all are so awful. Why, blah, 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 blah. And I would just go at it and I would scrub and I would clean it. And then I'd calm down and I'd open the door and I'd come out and I'd be like, it's all good now. It's like I said, I think my mom did it so I would clean the bathroom. But point being that until we connect with the story of the child and heal her or him and say, I can parent you now. I'm here for you. I can protect you. Then that story starts to dissolve and it doesn't run our lives anymore. But we can't heal it until we know it.
Yeah.
So that's what I do in my coaching programs.
I love it. And we're going to hear more from you. Susan's doing a show on her network. And so there's lots more to come, because this is where the power of our stories are changing the world. Things are changing here and they are important. Susan, I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much. What's your personal message? What would you like to leave us with today?
Change your story, change our world. #storyfield.
I love it. Thank you so much. And, if you can't do that, clean the bathroom.
Clean the bathroom.
I'm telling you, I grew up in an Italian family. That was a go-to. That was it. Thank you. Susan Dolci, I'm Dr. Pat. We're going to take a short break, everybody. You know what? For more about Susan, go ahead. Susan, what's the websites again for people?
SusanDolci.com, goddessarriving.com.
All right. And I'm Dr. Pat. You can go to the Dr. Pat Show or Transformation Talk Radio. Yep. We're having some fun now, everybody. Let's take a short break, Benny. Let's take a short break, Zach. We'll be right back.